Susan Levin is the Director of Nutrition Education at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. That's PCRM, and I bet you're all familiar with that. She researches and writes about the connection between plant-based diets and a reduced risk of chronic diseases. And through her work, she also addresses the need for nutrition guidelines that reflect PCRM's new 4 food groups, which is fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. And personally, I was very honored earlier this year when Susan agreed to do the nutritional review for my book, Fit Cookies, 5-Minute Targeted Body Shaping Workouts. It's very important to me that everything in there be supported through research, whether the fitness or the nutrition. So she very kindly went through all of my documents and gave me some tips and approved it all for you. So thank you very much, Susan, and please welcome Susan Levin.
Okay, thanks for, you know this isn't Dr. McDougall's talk, right? And nobody's soaking any nuts in here. So I am shocked to see you, but honored. Is anyone in here, were you at Friday's health conference? Good, because I did this exact talk then. This is a rerun. And did anyone go to Brenda Davis's talk about paleo yesterday evening? Okay, so I'll touch on paleo, but this is a little bit broader of an overview. When Northwest Veg Fest asked me to come do this conference, they picked this topic, which I thought was pretty interesting and very challenging, because to research fad, quote-unquote, diets and the evidence behind them, whether to support them or negate them or whatever, that's quite a challenge, because there's not a lot of evidence or science looking at these studies for whatever reason, but we'll go over each of those. Okay, so the first thing that you'll see as a common thread through a lot of these diets, whether for better or for worse, is they do tend to produce weight loss. And there's a reason why these diets are popular, because there's sometimes, or often, if you stick to them, there's going to be immediate weight loss results. But we're going to kind of talk about the bigger picture here, not just weight loss. So here's some common problems that I saw with the fad diets that I looked at. Now, I haven't looked at every, and I'm saying fad diet, although you'll see through this conversation, not all of these are necessarily fads, but they're just popular or trendy things people are doing. And some common problems I saw throughout included restricting food products for weight loss, which is not always the healthiest approach, depending on what's being restricted. Not healthy or sustainable for the long term, so you might, even if you stuck to one of these diets for a long time and you lost a lot of weight, you might also be inflicting harm on your body in some other way. It's too fast of a rate of weight loss a lot of times, and that's not sustainable, and you're losing probably water or lean muscle mass. And there's some nutrient deficiency issues, and then logistically it can be very expensive to follow, and in my opinion, the most egregious part about a lot of these diets is they don't really teach people how to eat healthfully. They're very focused on just kind of a concept without really talking about how to change your life or your lifestyle, which I think is quite different than what you've been hearing at this conference, lifestyle choices and how that can affect your life. So I'm going to start with probably right now one of the most popular fad diets in America, and one that I'm kind of hoping by next year at this conference time won't really be that popular, but we'll see. This is the Paleo diet, and I'm sure you've all heard of it. And if you don't know some of the concepts behind it, it is what is called a pre-agriculture diet. It includes animals, including fish, pasture-raised animals, eggs, does include vegetables, fruit, roots, fungi, and nuts. But you do avoid beans, so pulses, lentils, beans, dairy products, grains, potatoes, refined salt, sugar, and oils. So that's kind of the basis of most paleo diets. However, if you look up, when I started researching the evidence behind what the paleo diet was claiming, the rewards you will reap from this diet, and and what the diet actually is based on, there's no basis in archaeological reality because, for a few reasons, the Paleolithic era, if you don't know, and I didn't until I started looking into it, started over 2 million years ago, and it ended about 10,000 years ago. So that's quite a time span to try to pinpoint one diet or even one environment on the globe and what people were eating at one specific time period is virtually impossible. The Paleolithic era, also the people lived all over the planet, so you can't possibly know or assume what one group is eating. And then, interestingly, I think now that they've started hearing more about this and they're looking at mummies and their teeth, and they're able to see actually that this population wasn't what paleo dieters are proclaiming they were. They actually did eat legumes and grains, besides foraging for other plant foods. And in addition to that, they ate not cows and chickens, obviously, they ate game, wild game, and a lot of rodents. So it doesn't really consider how the plants, not just humans, but how the plants have evolved over the years and what plants look like then versus now. So if you were to eat and forage for food all day long, including hunting, you're going to eat a lot of very fibrous food. So they actually had quite a high fiber diet, along with eating all the game and rodents and other animals. And it doesn't really even consider the health. So you have these people advocating for a paleo diet, but they're not really telling you that Paleolithic people really didn't live that long and they didn't necessarily live that well. I mean, granted, it was a tough life, right? How much of this is attributed to diet versus just getting run over by a herd of antelope, I don't know. But evidence of atherosclerosis, that's plaque in your heart. There's evidence of that in about 1/3 of mummies from all over the world. And then many hunter-gatherers, we can tell, were a lot smaller. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but they were also smaller because they weren't as well nourished. So again, not exactly the kind of diet that you want to brag about necessarily. In looking in these medical journals, again, this is such a new diet that we don't have a lot of research on how it's going to pan out in terms of people's health. And we can look at other diets like low-carb diets and see the effects. But what I found interesting is there are actually hunter-gatherer societies today living on the planet, and this is one that has pretty good research. I might be mispronouncing it, but I say Hiwi because it's fun. And they live in this region. They live around on the border of Venezuela and Colombia, and they have about a 95% hunter-gatherer type diet, meaning they don't get their food out of a grocery store, they actually go out and earn it. About 68% of which is fish or game, so very much like what Paleolithic people used to eat. But they're, as we saw with the mummies, they're shorter, they're tired, and they're less healthy. And we know this because they actually manifest a lot of infections, which you can imagine if you're eating a lot of raw meat, you're going to have some problems. And very common problem are hookworms. And then if those are the kind of problems you're facing, you're not going to have a very long life, but as you can see here statistically, just getting to the age of 15, you have a 50-50 shot of that. So again, not necessarily, if you're really following a Paleolithic diet, it might not be the best plan. And we know because we can look at these modern societies. So these are the kind of facts I like to point out to people that are, our paleo diet. And it's like, my first reaction to things like that is, it's so dumb. Like, I just want to say it's so stupid. It's not even worth I'm not even going to bother telling you why. But because Northwest Veg Fest forced me to look up reasons why, now you have it. There's actual science to back up why paleo is not very good for you. And I have a feeling it's going to peter out once some of these problems start manifesting. However, I do in this presentation want to point out the upside of these diets because I do think that there is something in them. There can be a ray of light in the consciousness of people. And with the paleo, I think that limiting processed food, that's a good thing. And limiting dairy products is also a good thing. I'm a big, dairy is my enemy, so I'm always happy when some diet says, don't drink cow's milk. It's like, well, that's good. So they've got that. Another popular fad right now is gluten-free diets. And I don't mean to say that some people aren't gluten-free for a reason. That's not the point of this. But does everyone know what gluten is? It's in these 3 grains and derivatives of these 3 grains: wheat, rye, and barley. And 6 to 7% of the population, this is just an estimate, we don't actually necessarily know. I know Dr. McDougall says fewer. But what I found in my research was about 6 to 7% are sensitive to gluten, and about 1% actually cannot tolerate gluten at all because they have celiac disease and autoimmune disease, so they can't touch it. Now some cons, again, this isn't my opinion, this is what I'm finding in the medical journals, that the cons to having a gluten-free diet are that people who adopt them tend to eat more processed food that has more sugar and fat in it. Now, if you're going to do that, you're going to start consuming more calories, and you're going to be displacing some vitamins, minerals, and sometimes fiber, because fiber is in a lot of the grain foods that we eat, wheat-based foods, and foods that are not accepted on gluten-free diets, like oat and spelt and the rye, the barley. So you're getting all those out of your diet, and you're losing a major source of fiber. It can also be very expensive. However, on the upside, it's necessary. So people who have celiac disease have to eat this way. So on one hand, it seems like this is good for people with celiac, right? Because suddenly this is a very popular diet, so they're able to eat more products, it's better labeled. However, I've also heard from people who have celiac that really resent people jumping on a gluten-free trend because it's different for them. When celiac people go out to a restaurant and they order a gluten-free item, they mean business. They don't mean I'm a little sensitive to it or I just don't want it. So restaurants maybe aren't being as careful as they should be. But people on gluten-free diets learn more about different grains. I think that's good. So we're learning to eat things besides wheat. We're learning to eat things like rice and quinoa, amaranth, millet. Oh, I have pictures. And using potato and corn as your starch base as well. And related to that was this interesting book and physician who came out and said, no, it's the wheat. Wheat is the enemy, not gluten. Wheat is addictive. It contributes to all these chronic diseases, including type 2 diabetes, asthma, acid reflux, and joint pain. And he said that this is because wheat is not what it was 1,000, 100 years ago. It's been genetically engineered to be some kind of grain that isn't even recognizable by the human body. And that it causes central obesity, he said. I would like to point out that most grains and vegetables and fruits are not what they looked like 100 years ago. It's not just wheat, but okay. So he's jumping on kind of this gluten-free, low-carb trend with the wheat belly diet. And unfortunately, I didn't see him. Someone told me he was on Dr. Oz, and he had given the audience a test. He gave everyone a slice of wheat. Did anyone see this? A slice of white bread, and then he gave them some kind of, I don't know, like high-fat piece of chocolate or something. And he said when he took their glycemic index, and your glycemic index is a measure of how fast a food turns to sugar once you consume it. He said the bread turned to sugar so fast, so much more than the chocolate, that clearly all these people, it's bad for you. You need to be on the wheat belly diet. But what I think he probably does understand but didn't convey is that's not a measure of health. If I gave you a piece of bread and a Snickers bar, your blood sugar is going to shoot up much faster with a piece of bread because the fat and the protein pulls down your blood sugar. So I think he was misleading people into thinking that wheat is bad, but through the glycemic index, but it really wasn't a fair assessment. So if you look up his claims, if you flip through the book, and you try to match it on the NIH library to see if there's actually any evidence to back it up, I could not find any. And I was sorry to see that he does restrict certain foods like fruit, which I think is unfortunate. And it encourages the saturated fat and cholesterol sources like meat and cheese. And this is it's basically just a low-carb diet with a different name. So it's marketing. On the upside, though, it does promote low glycemic index foods, which isn't a bad thing because low glycemic index foods tend to be like high-fiber foods like beans and other whole grains and vegetables. And if you're not eating wheat, well, guess what? You're going to learn about other variety of grains just like we did with the gluten-free diet. Now, is there anyone in here who knows Dr. Dodonna? Is that how you say it? Does anyone here know him? Or is he in the room? Because I'm about to go off on this guy, and I don't. He's from the area, and I'm scared. But anyway, this guy went to, I think he's a naturopath, and he went to where I went to school in Seattle, which was Bastyr University. So he's probably beloved by his hometown, and that's fine. I think, if anything, it's brilliant. He's brilliant, obviously, to come up with this genius plan. It's genius, right? It's been around for a while. So these are the different blood types. O, you're going to be needing to eat a lot of meat. A is agrarian, so you're going to be more of a vegetarian, plant-based eater. Nomad is a varied diet where AB is somewhere in between the two. Meat-eating vegetarian. So type O, do you know what the most common blood type is? Because now he's saying to most people, you need to be restricting your carbs and eating a lot of meat. He's actually suggesting to you to encourage ketosis. Do you know what ketosis is? It's not good. It really sends your body out of whack. And it's when you consume a really protein-heavy, low-carb diet, your body wants carbs. It needs it for your brain. It needs it for your energy. And if you don't get enough carbs, your body will go into ketosis. It's bad. And he recommends oils and on top of the meat and the dairy. On top of the meat, excuse me. And I just thought this was interesting. He's pushing meat. He's pushing oil for type O's. And then he's sitting here saying, don't eat nuts, because that's disgusting. That's like really high in fat, and who needs that? So I just couldn't, there's just some little quotes that I pulled right out of the book that to me would be enough to show that maybe this diet is not evidence-based. But that's O, and I'm sorry for the O's, because this is not going to be good for you. Type A, you're lucky because you get to be vegetarian. Oh, and I want to point out also, O's are encouraged to exercise vigorously. You can handle it, so have fun with that. That's good. That's good advice. No, that's good advice. If you're A, you're vegetarian, you do not respond well to exercise. You need a low-stress activity, maybe yoga for you. Your immunity is weak. Sorry. And I pulled this quote out because this is when I wanted to close the book and say, this is over. But with a family history of breast cancer, consider introducing snails into your diet. I read it over and snails, it's a typo, right? I don't think so. What's that?
Banana slugs also?
Banana slugs, at least that sounds healthier, I don't know. But it's quotes like this that make you scratch your head. It's like, who's doing this? Type B, more flexible, you have a strong immune system, and that's good because you're going to be drinking a lot of dairy, and you can't exercise at all, but you can paint. You can be creative. That's your outlet. And I don't know if anyone knows anything about type B blood types. I didn't until I looked into it, but most type Bs are Asian or African descent, which if you know anything about being anything but Northern European, you're probably lactose intolerant. And here he is telling this population, you're the group that needs to be drinking dairy. So I just have to wonder if I just Wikipedia that, so I don't know why he didn't. Sensitive, type AB has a sensitive digestive tract, you're a mixed bag, you're too tolerant in your immunity, and forget even painting, you just need to pray, because you can't exercise and you can't be creative. You don't even get dairy, you get sour dairy. So, and you can have eggs, so there, I guess that's something, that's a gift. Obviously you can tell, I'm trying not to be snarky, I really am, because the point of this is that there is science to support not doing these fad diets, you don't have to be a wise ass, that's just me. So, but here's the thing, this diet has actually been around long enough that there are people trying to research if it's real, if it works. And this reviewer from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, one of the top medical journals, found 16 articles where people were looking at this diet. Only one, however, qualified because, for example, if you try to test a diet but you also restrict calories or have people exercising, it doesn't work. You've ruined your study. So he only found one that met all the criteria. And none of them showed any positive health effects for this diet. So there's no scientific information on the diet, and unfortunately, a big con to me is all these awesome foods are restricting, fruits, vegetables, and grains. For all blood types, there are restrictions in these areas, which I think is dangerous. But I'm going to be positive, so yay, he's discouraging dairy products for most people, except for the ones who are lactose intolerant. And he's discouraging egg consumption for most, that's good. Discourages highly processed foods pretty much for everybody, that's good. And he discourages meat products for some, unfortunately not for most. So in one category, I'm going to just kind of swoop over high protein, low carb. I don't know how this diet persists today with all the evidence we do have to support not doing it, but it still exists. So you still have remnants of Atkins, reducing carb intake, pretty severe reduction in carb intake, that it does induce ketosis, like we talked about. Your body starts breaking down in its function, getting very acidic, and its focus is high protein. And zone diet, I don't hear much about the zone diet anymore, but it's sort of the same guidelines, maybe not as severe as an Atkins type diet. The bad parts with high protein diets typically is they don't discourage saturated fatty acids. Now this is the bad fat, or the fat that triggers your body to make too much cholesterol and causes heart disease. And again, fewer carbs than your brain needs to function, and that's the first goal of the carbs you eat, not to mention exercise. But protein focus displaces all these other healthful foods, which we're kind of seeing a pattern with that. Short-term weight loss, which we know is no good. I must know, everyone in my family's been on this diet. Well, I lost 10 pounds, and then, well, what happened? Like, I just couldn't do it. Because eventually you want to get up and you want to move, and you can't do that on a high-protein diet. Carbs are the go-to fuel for exercise and physical activity. And I think something most people don't know, because it's healthy, right? This is good weight loss. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the American Medical Association, the American Cancer Society, and the American Heart Association all say this diet is dangerous. And that's because this diet has been around for a long time now, and we can see the long-term effects of eating this way. At first, you kind of saw some study, well, maybe this does lead to weight loss, and if you do lose weight, you will have some other side effects, like maybe your cholesterol starts to go down, your blood pressure starts to go down, or your insulin sensitivity improves. That's kind of short-term with weight loss, but eventually, if you're eating like this, all that stuff goes right back up, and twofold, it gets worse. So these health organizations have all kind of gotten on the same page about this is not the right diet for health. On the upside, you could do something like this with plant sources of protein. I've heard of an Atkins diet that was created by Dr. David Cheekins from Canada. And I don't know the ratio of fat, carbs, protein with that. I mean, if you're getting your protein from beans, you're going to be getting a lot of carbs too, so it sounds like it could be healthier possibly. And it does discourage the consumption of sugary foods, which is always good. So fasting, this is, I don't even want to say a fad or a trend because fasting has been around a lot longer than any of us have been around. So it has a deep history or tradition, and it does have some, in medical journals, mixed benefits. So that's good, and it's arguably our bodies were meant to fast. They're really actually quite good at it. What we're not very good at is the overconsumption that we tend to do every day. Right? Like people always say, it's so much easier to gain weight than to lose weight. And that's because your body always thinks it's about to go starve. It's about to famine. It's about to fast. But we don't do this part anymore. So maybe we're biologically equipped to handle it. However, I mean, there can be some cons with it, like a vitamin and mineral deficiency. If you're going without food for a week, then you've lost this opportunity to replenish things like calcium and antioxidants, and that's not necessarily a good thing. However, it just kind of depends on how long you stick to fasting. Your metabolism will slow, so it's not necessarily a weight loss program. And there are extreme scenarios where you could get something like anemic because you're not replenishing. Like if you're menstruating women and you're not getting any iron, you could be pretty exhausted from fasting. And it doesn't, I think this is the most important part, is it doesn't overcome a bad diet. I hear a lot of people who use fasting as an excuse to eat a lot of hamburgers and french fries. So it's okay because I'm going to fast for 3 days. And you can't overcome arterial plaque and high blood pressure that you get from your diet just by not eating for a few days. It doesn't work that way. And it's certainly not supported. You can't really exercise while fasting either. On the upside though, I think it can be part of an overall healthy lifestyle. So if you have a healthy diet most of the time and every once in a while you fast, I think it's great. I think our bodies can handle that. If you like it, like I have a bad diet, I'm gonna cleanse, and then I'm gonna adopt a good diet, it's good. It's a really good mental reset for your health. And there is research showing that fasting and intermittent fasting actually is supportive of reversing some symptoms of diabetes and heart disease, which I think is really interesting. Again, it's not in conjunction with a bad diet, it's just intermittent. Something about having fewer calories probably lends to some benefit for people who overconsume calories otherwise. So prepackaged meal plan diets, these have been around for a long time, and they're clearly doing well because you see the expensive marketing campaigns in magazines and on TV. Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig are just a couple of them. They are member-based. You pay a fee for that, and you pay for the meals based on your goals. So it's a pretty regulated plan. Some of the cons I saw we all have our opinions about cons, but it is expensive, I discovered. However, if you go to Whole Foods and get your lunch, that's pretty expensive too. So you could argue that either way. It all comes to your door, on your doorstep. So that means it's prepackaged with preservatives and chemicals and sodium. That's not necessarily good for everybody. It makes it hard. You can't really go out. I guess you could go out with your prepackaged meals, or you can go out and watch other people eat, but it doesn't really lend to a very social environment. And you may need to cook for your family. It's very difficult to transition out of prepackaged meal plans because you haven't really learned anything about how to eat. However, it is very regimented and easy. It's kind of easy to just have your food handed to you in a package. It's calorie and fat controlled. You know exactly how many calories you're going to consume if your goal is to lose weight. It's convenient, customizable. I noticed if I went on one of these plans and said I'm vegan, it could customize the plan to me. And there's counseling and support provided. And it does suggest a healthier, your calories should be in line with 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss, so that's pretty good. And I want to point out something real quick before I go on, which is this picture. This is a snippet. I took this, I don't know, I don't know what site I took this from, but this was where you get to choose your breakfast. This just happens to be the breakfast page. And what do you notice about this page? Yeah, it's a lot of pastries, donuts. You said carbs, but I mean, carbs are fine, but these are just really super refined carbs. It's brown. I mean, there's just no variety or excitement in this page to me, except, I get to eat donuts for breakfast? It's not really educating me about a healthful lifestyle. So, juice cleansing. Again, I think this is a lot like fasting. I don't think it's necessarily a fad. I mean, there's definitely a trend now. There's a lot of businesses that are juice. They make juice for you, and that's great. But in terms of, it's a concentrate of fruits and vegetables in a drink. It's a temporary break from solid food, so it's kind of like fasting, but with calories. And one thing I saw with fiber is taxing on digestion. Some juice cleanse said, I was like, what is that? I felt fiber is great for digestion. It's not taxing at all. We need it. So I didn't think that was such a great selling point, but that's one to tout. Now, some cons is when you look at the research for people who do juicing, and this is research done at the Mayo Clinic, you can gain weight because you're juicing, you're drinking your calories, and drinking your calories is a lot easier than eating your calories. So you can overconsume calories and gain weight. And then if you do lose weight, it's often water weight. So you are under consuming your calorie needs, you lose weight, probably water weight. It can be dangerous. Some of these juices, a lot of these businesses now are unpasteurized, which has its benefits, but it can also be dangerous. There's no fiber, typically. These aren't smoothies per se. These are juices where the fiber gets kicked out the back of the machine. That fiber should be going in your body and building up a healthy gut. It can be very expensive, for sure. But I do see an upside to juicing as well. I think it is a great way to consume fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables. If you're not a big vegetable eater or your kids aren't, putting in a juice is a great trick. And you still get all these vitamins and minerals when you do that. So yeah, again, not all of these, even though I'm pointing out cons, I do think that some of these trends are positive. I think certainly a trend to drinking juice versus a trend to smoking mini cigars, you're going to want to do, those are both trends. I think juice is obviously the winner there. Has anyone ever heard of alkaline diet? This seems to be catching on to a little steam here, and unfortunately, not a lot of evidence in medical journals about whether it's good or bad. What I could find, and what just explain, like the definition of an alkaline diet is kind of all over the map too, but in general, it's slightly alkaline, what you're consuming. And the reasoning is that having low potassium, magnesium, and fiber, coupled with high saturated fat, salt, sugar, and chloride, leads to acidosis in your body. And this is just basically a profile of what the American diet is, right? So the reasoning is we need to change the Western type diet and adopt more of an alkaline diet. And I do think there's something to that. This is a snippet of somebody's definition in pictorial form of acid to alkaline foods. And I thought it was, they vary a lot. So there's just not a lot of consistency with how people are defining alkaline foods versus acidic foods. And that's going to be the first problem when we try to look at research. If you can't define the diet, it's very hard to do research on it. There's some cons. It does promote a lot of high-fat foods like nuts, seeds, and avocados, which are good for you in limited amounts. But if you go overboard, it could lead to weight gain. And it raises your risk of things like diabetes and heart disease. And arguably your body already knows how to regulate your pH. That's what it's designed to do, is to be in homeostasis, right? To be at that pH level that your body likes. It doesn't really matter necessarily what you eat. You may not lose weight because you could still overdo it with the portion sizes of these high-fat foods. And then the list of alkaline versus acidic is confusing, like I said. And there's no exact definition of what percentage alkaline, what percentage acidic, and if you tell someone just to eat a little bit of meat because it's acidic, what is a little bit of meat? People don't really understand moderation necessarily. And one of their big selling points is it protects your bones, because if your body is acidic, your calcium buffers that acid, and that's true, but there's no kind of cause and effect here in the medical journals. There's nothing to prove that an alkaline diet leads to better bone health. But I will say, because it discourages meat, dairy, caffeine, alcohol, salt, and sugar, it increases all these fruits and vegetables with a lot of potassium and reduces the sodium ratio. It can be beneficial to your bone health, but it's not necessarily because it's alkaline versus acidic, as much as you're just eating healthier. Now, Weight Watchers has been around a long time. My mom did it when I was little, and she's doing it still 40 years later, but it's just different now. Now it's a point system, right? It's not so much about slices of bread, it's not how many points are applied to that bread. It's an anything fits diet, so anything in moderation works. It does, unlike a lot of other diets, have a consequence to poor nutrient choices. That consequence is just you don't get to eat as much, right? There's a lot of points in that donut. If you eat all your points in that donut, you're not going to be able to eat your dinner, kind of a thing. And there is a support element, group support, which is good. The cost can be prohibitive, as can the support group. Like going to this live meeting every week can be prohibitive for some people. It's this everything in moderation thing doesn't work. Like, that's just why I think most Americans are in trouble, because every piece of dietary advice we get from the government is moderation. Everything fits, and what we consequently get is disease in moderation, and it doesn't work. It's a very quantitative program. Everything has a number. Everything is a point. You have to fill out this chart online. Food isn't food anymore. It's just a number, and I don't think that educates people about what's healthy, what's not, and lifestyle choices. And we were talking before this talk earlier about, I don't want to think about how much protein and how much calcium. I just want to eat. And that's the beauty of a whole foods plant-based diet. You just eat. You don't have to really count anything. On the upside, though, is it distinguishes between good and bad. This is its motto: don't eat less, eat smarter. That sounds smart. I mean, that sounds positive. It just doesn't necessarily work. It has group support, and it is slow, steady weight loss. 1 to 2 pounds a week is what is supported. And if you can maintain this kind of, you can stick to this point system, I guess, for the rest of your life. Because once you go back to eating like a real animal, like a real person who just wants to eat food, you're probably going to see some weight gain. Now, the Mediterranean diet is just a name attributed to a way of eating that has existed for a long time, so it's hard to call this a fad, but it's eating primarily plants, fruits, vegetables, whole grains. It does have oil, olive oil, herbs, asks you to limit meat, but you can eat fish and chicken, limit it, but you can have it. Red wine is good, and be active. So, 70% good advice in my opinion. And you get to live there, so who doesn't want to live there and be skinny and on the beach and drink wine? But it doesn't necessarily result in weight loss, and I don't think anyone should think it does. I do think that it can, because it is better than what the average American eats. So chances are, if you adopt this way of eating, you will lose initially a little bit of weight. But it's still a lot of fat and cholesterol, even from olive oil and from the animal products they let you eat. And the research has been done, and there's big studies with this way of eating that are current out. And there's a big one in Spain called the Prepackaged study. And unfortunately, however, a good study always has an intervention, and it has a control, so you can compare it. And the intervention being the Mediterranean diet type eating. And the control, unfortunately, was this very high fat of people who ate about 39% of their calories from fat, which reduced its fat intake when they were told to, the control is to watch your fat. low-fat diet, they called it. And their fat intake went from 39 to 37%. And they still call that a low-fat diet. That is not a low-fat diet. The average American consumes 33% fat. So these people are worse than the average, the control, worse than the average American. So I just don't, it's a good study if you're interested in what people on a Mediterranean diet eat versus what people who eat worse than the average American eats. But I don't think that that's going to really help us decide if this is this diet we want to go on. On the upside though, is obviously it supports a lot of plant consumption, which is a lot of fiber and nutrients, that's good. It reduces sugar and red meat, also good. And it's typically better than your typical Western diet pattern. So raw food diets. Also, again, they're just becoming more trendy. They're becoming more accessible. There's raw food restaurants, raw food cookbooks. It was popularized in the 1800s by Sylvester Graham, who was the graham cracker was named for him, which I think that's interesting. He was a vegetarian and a big promoter of sort of a lot of raw foods and for sure vegetarian foods. Some people listened to him, some people didn't, until the cholera epidemic swept across the planet through Europe and got to the United States. And the people he had on his diet didn't get hurt by this cholera epidemic, and suddenly people listened. Like, what is this guy saying? Well, I'm saying people should eat mostly a raw diet and a completely plant-based diet. So that's how this diet sort of got itself on the map, and it's had its advocates for years, but it's somehow become kind of trendy lately. And you do cook food below 118 degrees, which one con might be it's not going to kill all the bacteria that could be in that food. And the cost and time may be prohibitive. I think if you do a raw food diet correctly, you need to really do it. You need to do the sprouting, and you need to do the dehydrating, which is fine. People can do that, and they can figure it out. It's very, very helpful. But you just have to be committed to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be eating lettuce and carrots, and you're going to wonder why you don't feel so well. It's like, well, it's not exactly a raw food diet. Now, there's not a lot of evidence to support the claims by raw foodists, but it's mostly because there's just not a lot of research. It's not that they're wrong. It's just there's very little research. And because, again, the definition of a raw food diet is a little bit all over the map, they can't even pinpoint the people to do research on. Because is it 75% raw? Is it 80% raw? Is it 100% raw? 50%? So it's hard to pinpoint the diet. But what they do know from the research that they have seen is that it's obviously high in fiber and nutrients. It has certainly the same non-nutritional benefits that people who practice vegan diets, for example, ethical and environmental. And then the sparse research does support some benefits for things like arthritis and heart disease, but the benefits don't seem to be more so than people who are on vegan diets with cooked food. This one I'm throwing in there because I can't believe it exists. Has anyone ever heard of this? Right. So I thought it reads like something you would see. Right, it'd be people, in the magazines, I only read at my doctor's office, because I'm too good for that, but that's so true, I read them all the time. So, this was on the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website, under their fad diet section, which is where I was looking for some research, like what are the fad diets today, maybe I don't even know. And this is one that they actually did research on, and it's called the ketogenic, there's that ketosis, Latin again, enteral nutrition diet. And this is when enteral nutrition, if you don't know, is when you're in a hospital and you can't chew or swallow. They put a tube in your nose that goes down your esophagus into your stomach so they can just feed you with liquids. And then they just program in the ratio of protein, carb, fat, and that's that. But this is about 800 calories a day. Way fewer calories than most people need literally just to be alive, sitting in a chair. And apparently it's popular with brides-to-be, or so this website said, or the Academy said. Do I need to go through this? This is the risk when you're lying in a hospital room with a perfectly educated nurse there to help you is pulmonary aspiration. It's coughing up the food through your nose that can choke you. The infections from tubes are very common. Getting a tube down your esophagus is not very easy. GI problems, because your body doesn't like to eat like this, obviously. I think it screams of an eating disorder type behavior as well. And some of these formulas I read have no carbs in them. So they program them to be just protein and maybe some fat, which is just horrendous. So this is a terrible, this is worse than fasting, and I can't think of anything on the outside. If you've got something, let me know, because this is just bad news all around. So, I mean, just to show you that people will continue to do anything to lose weight when I feel like what we have here is an answer, and you've heard it at this conference, it is so simple. I'm a dietitian. I mean, people pay me to say the dumbest stuff, you know, like eat food, eat real food. I mean, it's so easy, it's so simple. I feel guilty like having this job, and I hope I honestly hope someday they don't need dietitians anymore. But what we've seen is that weight loss is likely. Weight loss is likely, but it's not necessarily lifestyle change. It's a very focused on quantity, constant quantity and counting, not quality, and they're just not sustainable. So eventually people fall off and they find themselves even more confused than when they started. However, a place where you can find a lot of evidence, a lot of research, not a ton, but plant-based diets a lot, vegan diets some, there's more, there's always more coming, and they work. They show reduced risk of heart disease, obesity and overweight, type 2 diabetes, cancer, longevity. There was just a study released last week by Dr. Dean Ornish. He continues to do his work with cancer and heart disease. He's really focused on cancer right now, and he's been studying people with prostate cancer. And what he did was, he took, so he had the prostate cancer study going on. He took samples of their chromosomes and their DNA and saved them. And the people that were on the vegan diet over a course of, I think it was maybe a year now, he showed that do you know what telomeres, have you ever heard of those? They're in the tips of your chromosomes, and that's how they know how sick or how long you're gonna live. The older you get, the shorter they get. And everybody's scientists all over the place, drug companies are trying to figure out a drug that can lengthen these so that people can live longer. But he's figured out, yet again, props to Dean Ornish, he's figured out how to do this with diet. He's shown that if you actually consume a plant-based, low-fat, so 10% of your calories from fat, diet, they actually lengthened the tips of their chromosomes, which is just unheard of, whereas the people in the control group, theirs, of course, shortened because they're aging. It's also a reflection of your chronic disease risk. It's not just longevity. So on the upside with vegan diets, what can I say? It's evidence-based. That's wonderful for people who try to fight you on it. It's like, I have more science that I know what to do with. It's good for you, it's good for the animals, and it's good for the environment. This is just a win-win-win all around, and I'm excited about it. So I think a lot of people would practice a vegan diet even if it weren't good for them, because they feel like it's the right thing to do. But the good news is it's absolutely the best thing you can do for yourself. So it's okay to be a little bit selfish, and you're gonna win. Your health is gonna win here. So that's my overview of fad diets and other diets, and I'm happy to take some Q&A if you have any.